Usama. We just had Usama. Alhamdulillah. Let's have now. You want to deal with this one?
Yeah. Fine.
Okay.
You have to unmute. All right, Sister Juwairia, go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu.
Yeah, so I have a very simple question. So my first question is regarding the age of Nuh alayhi salam. In Quran, it says that Nuh alayhi salam was 950 years old. Not how long he lived, but it says he gave dawah to his people for 950 years. That means he lived more than that. Is that possible for a normal human being to live nearly 1,000 years?
The ayah is فَلَبِثَ فِيهِمْ أَلْفَ سَنَةٍ إِلَّا 50 عَامًا فَأَخَذَهُمُ الطُّوفَانُ وَهُمْ ظَالِمُونَ in Surah Al-Ankabut, chapter 29 of the Quran. He lived, like you said, he lived with them, or he stayed with them, or he remained with them for 1,000 years minus 50, so it's 950 years. And then Allah destroyed them thereafter. And no, it's not possible. It's not possible, but it's not normal. It's not the normal thing for a human being to live 950 years, which is why that's why Allah mentioned it in the first place, because it was abnormal. If it was normal, why did He mention it? He never mentions anyone's how long they, in the exception of Yunus. He mentions how many people became Muslim, but he doesn't mention in the Quran, how long a prophet stayed with the people. That's not a usual thing that he mentions. So he only mentions it because it was an exception from the rule, not the rule itself. And if Allah wills, He can make a human being 1,000 years. He can make them 2,000 years. He can make them 10,000 years.
Same with Adam alayhi salam, right? 1,000 years.
I don't know. It's not in the Quran, but it's maybe you're thinking of a hadith.
Yeah, that's what my doubt.
Yeah. So it's Allah. Look, there's the beautiful ayah of the Quran. There's one in Surah Al-Baqarah actually that will direct your attention to, and one.
So it's a miracle by Allah subhanahu.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions in Surah Al-Baqarah, وانظر إلى العظام كيف ننشزها, and there's two qira'ats, ننشرها and ننشزها, ثم نكسوها لحما, and look at the bones, how Allah He basically ننشزها or ننشرها, He, depending on which qira'ah you go for, so it's either that He disperses it and then He covers it with flesh. So Allah is talking about a كالذي مر على قرية. It's a person who walked at a village and he saw these people, and Allah says, and the person says, how can this town become living after it's dead? So Allah, because they had this contention, Allah showed them through this miracle. And it's not something which is a standalone in the Quran about Noah living for 950 years, because you also see the Ashab al-Kahf, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions, that He put them in the cave. The people in the cave, they were sleeping, for a long time. I'm trying to remember the ayah.
What is that? Chapter 18 of the Quran?
So let me get
of course. So they were still for how many years, did they say?
That's what I can't get you. It's 300 minus 6. Let me get exactly that. وَلَبِثُوا فِي كَهْفِهِمْ 300 سِنِينَ وَازْدَادُوا 9. That's on 309 years. وَلَبِثُوا فِي كَهْفِهِمْ 300 سِنِينَ وَازْدَادُوا. They lived in that cave for 309 years. And why did Allah mention that? Because it was miraculous. Allah, He did this. Otherwise it would be useless. It would be frivolous to mention it. Superfluous.
Yeah, I thought that the ancient people lived for long years.
We don't know. We don't know how, but we do know in the beginning of the surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, that when the sun was coming to the left, He was averting the sun from them. Where Allah says, when the sun comes to the east and it comes to the west and so on, so it's moving the sun away from them so it doesn't burn them. So He's giving us a kind of way that He didn't burn them in the cave and so on and so forth. But He's clearly telling us He's doing something which is miraculous, right? Like for example, Surah Al-Kahf, where it says, فلبثوا في كهفهم 300 سنين وازدادوا 9. قل الله أعلم بما لبثوا له غيب السماوات والأرض أبصر به وأسمع. Allah knows how long they've stayed in there, and so on and so forth. And if it was 309 years, we're talking about a very long time. So 309 years, 950 years, these are not the rule but the exception. If it was, Allah can do this. And yeah, it would be like when He put Ibrahim in the fire. And it says, Kuni bardatan. He says, be cool for Abraham. So these miracles are all over the Quran. It's not controversial.
Yes. And one would argue, is it totally unacceptable from even a physicalist point of view? Maybe not. I think there's some studies that may show that we could live for maybe 200 years in the future. You don't know. So this is an ever-evolving kind of scientific investigation. So there's nothing that would suggest that it's totally impossible from a physical point of view to live 300 years. Who knows? But the answer that Brother Hijab gave is adequate from the point of view that, this is like an exception. This is like a miraculous event. This is like a almost suspension of the natural laws, and so on and so forth. So I don't think it's entirely controversial. It's only controversial if you come from the perspective that miracles are impossible, that everything has to be explained naturalistically, that everything has to follow the kind of some kind of physicalist causal link, and within the kind of parameters that we understand in the physical world. If you come with that assumption, then it's problematic. But then that would be problematic for you to understand most of the Quran and Sunnah, because it talks about things that obviously are of the unseen, are of a miraculous nature, and so on and so forth. So yeah, Jazakallah khair.
No, if it's a miracle, I can accept it. I thought it was like ancient people did live up to this much years.
Well, if that was the case, I don't know why Allah would mention it like that, if it was normal. Because if it was, when Allah mentions numbers, it's usually because it's a very specific reason for it. There's nothing to prove that ancient people lived for that long, to be honest. But there is something. Obviously, we have the ayah that shows that Noah was in his people for 950 years, which is a very long time.
Yeah.
It's a very long time,
Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair, sister, for anything.
I have one more question.
Okay, of course, yeah, sure.
Yeah.